I'm Jake Morphonios with Blackstone Intelligence. Today is April 9th, 2018. I've been exchanging information with journalists, with military contacts, with other sources in and around Syria for the last few weeks, and I've got a lot of information to give you in today's intel report and in subsequent reports on this same subject. We have got some major action getting ready to take place out there in the Middle East that is going to just lead to extreme bloodshed. And I want you all to help me to get this information out to the public, because as you know, the American mainstream media is a propaganda outlet for corporate and banking interests. It's used by the Central Intelligence Agency to conduct psychological operations against the American people. So the information that I'm going to give you today needs to be spread around in social media to provide a counter to the war propaganda that most Americans are unwittingly consuming. So please share this video. I want you to share it on Facebook, on Twitter, on Reddit, wherever else you may post things, on Before It's News, 4chan, whatever your personal preference is. So let me tell you what's going on. In the 1990s, and we have to go back, I'm going to tell you, to understand what's happening in Syria right now, we have to go back in time. And trust me, for some of you, this will be a review of some information, but for a lot of people, this is new information. You cannot understand what is happening in Syria today without understanding how we got to this point. So back in the 1990s, there was a group of political elitists who got together and formed a think tank in Washington, D.C. They called it the Project for the New American Century. Project for the New American Century, or PNAC for short. The original PNAC signatories in 1997 consisted of 25 neoconservatives, which included George W. Bush, Dick Cheney, Donald Rumsfeld, Paul Wolfowitz. About 10 of these signatories they were part of the next presidential administration, and the policies that had been crafted by PNAC became the actual foreign policy agenda for the Bush administration. Several other of these prominent PNAC members served in various capacities in that new Bush neocon administration, and that included men like Richard Pearl. It included former CIA Director James Woolsey. It included John Bolton. You ought to know that name. This is the war hawk who just became President Trump's new national security advisor today. Well, the core goal of Project for the New American Century was to use the power of the United States to take control of the Middle East through different geopolitical maneuvers and through direct warfare. So as was revealed by members of the Bush administration, as soon as Bush took office, and it's just stunning that people in the administration came out and admitted to this, but as soon as Bush took office in January of 2001, PNAC members went to work plotting how to overthrow the government of Iraq, followed by the governments of several other Middle Eastern nations. It was part of this plan that the CIA would take the lead in coordinating the effort. However, back in early 2001, there was no legal, no moral justification for any of this. The fact that there was no justification for a massive assault to go in and reshape the Middle East, the fact that it wasn't justified was confirmed by PNAC itself in its own published papers. One of the publications they put out was called Rebuilding America's Defenses, and there's a section in that publication that's entitled Creating Tomorrow's Dominant Force. Let me read an excerpt to you from that paper. Quote, "Further, the process of transformation, even if it brings revolutionary change, is likely to be a long one, absent some catastrophic and catalyzing event like a new Pearl Harbor." The neocon Zionists of Project for a New American Century, they put it right there in black and white. They needed a catastrophic and catalyzing event on the level of the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. something that would get the American people so riled up they would give the government the control and the permission and the support that it needed to go out and attack. So, with the assistance of the Israeli Mossad, the Pakistani ISI, which is their intelligence service, and with Saudi Arabian financing, what the CIA did was they created a pretext for a wide-scale war in the Middle East that would later be known as the War on Terror. That is why the 3 towers in New York City, towers 1, 2, and 7, were brought down in controlled demolitions on September 11th, 2001. That is what it was for. To give the pretext needed to go in and attack all of these countries. Now, if you don't believe that, go back and find on the internet, look up the video of former Supreme Allied Commander of NATO, General Wesley Clark, a man who considered running for president, actually. He told the public immediately after the events of 9/11 that the Pentagon, he had gone into the Pentagon to visit. He was speaking with some of his old colleagues there. They said that the Pentagon had begun preparations for an invasion of 7 countries, including Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, Sudan, Syria, Lebanon, and finally, Iran. Now, we know that the United States attacked Afghanistan. We know that they went in, they installed Hamid Karzai, who is a puppet leader who immediately restarted the illegal opium trade, the money from which has been used to finance black operations by the CIA. It was Blackwater mercenaries who went in and gradually took over control of the operations from the U.S. military, and they're there to this day. Then, using the completely false propaganda that Saddam Hussein was somehow linked to the September 11th attacks, using the false propaganda that Hussein possessed chemical and biological weapons of mass destruction, and that he was seeking nuclear weapons, and that he was working with Al-Qaeda, all of which was completely untrue. The United States invaded and overthrew the Iraqi regime, and another puppet government was installed. Very weak. So weak, in fact, that in all of this chaos in the Middle East, the nearest major power was Iran. And just like we here in the United States exert our influence in our sphere, and just as Russia does the same, and China does the same, just as any major power exerts influence to the extent that it can, Iran, seeing this vacuum, exerted its influence in the region. Well, in these intervening years, we have seen the CIA work with the U.S. State Department to wage campaigns of covert terror in several other nations, including Sudan. I've reported on that, on the CIA drone strikes and other activities there. Now, in 2011, the United States overthrew the Libyan government. How did they do it? They used a network of extremist mercenaries. After they had plunged Libya into chaos and publicly assassinated without any trial the Libyan president, Muammar Gaddafi, and if you've seen the video, it's horrifying. I mean, they even sodomized him on camera with a 6-inch knife blade. Well, the CIA then sent these same mercenaries they used in Libya, they transferred them through the peninsula there, over into Jordan, up around, and into Iraq, and into Syria. And the CIA took the weapons that they couldn't transport with them as they went. They took these weapons and they ran the guns through the Libyan port of Benghazi. The weapons were transported up the Mediterranean into Turkey and back down into the waiting hands of the militias that were on the Syrian and Iraqi borders. Some of the local militias, in fact, there that were still in Libya, they knew about this gun running. And so they attacked the U.S. embassy because they were trying to get the guns for themselves. But what they didn't know was that the guns were actually being kept a mile away in a secret CIA annex, about a mile away from the Benghazi embassy. And in the process of assaulting the embassy, the U.S. ambassador was murdered. And that is why the Benghazi scandal was such a big deal at the time. That's why Secretary of State Hillary Clinton covered up, or at least she tried to cover up the scandal, claiming that the locals were just angry about a controversial movie that said things that weren't very favorable to Muhammad, the Prophet Muhammad. Come on. This criminal operation out of Benghazi was one of the major impetuses for Hillary Clinton to delete her archive of State Department emails to prevent the U.S. Congress from getting evidence of her crimes. Now, back up in Syria, the CIA was already coordinating the efforts of Al-Qaeda back in 2012, trying to start a civil war. When the Libyan mercenaries that had overthrew Gaddafi, overthrew the Libyan government, the banksters came in and installed a Rothschild central bank there. Once they brought Libya under control, these fighters went up to Iraq and Syria, and they merged with the existing extremist fighters there, Al-Qaeda. And a new organization was born as a result of that merger. The organization was called ISIS, and the Central Intelligence Agency created it. And with the help of the CIA, with the help of the Israeli Mossad, ISIS grew very quickly in power, and they went on one of the greatest murder sprees in modern history. Millions of Iraqis, millions of Syrians were displaced. That created this whole immigration crisis, the Muslim immigration crisis. That's what did it. It was our CIA. Tens of thousands of women and children were forced into the sex slave trade by ISIS. They took the men and they butchered them like animals. Their organs were sold on the black market for money. And the goal of the neoconservatives, all of which are Zionists, was to first eliminate the political influence of Iran in the region, replace the pro-Iranian governments with pro-Western ones, and ultimately to get into a war directly with Iran to take control of its vast oil resources. Because remember, we've done this before. We overthrew Operation Ajax. Look it up. The CIA overthrew the government of Iran back in 1953 to take control of the oil fields. The Iranian Revolution in 1979 countered that, and the Iranians got control of their resources again. So what's happening now? We're trying to take it back yet again. The Zionist neocons want control of the oil in the region for their Rothschild corporations. And this is not hard to confirm. You can go to Genie.com. Genie is an Israeli oil company that is actually based in New Jersey. It's called Genie Energy, and they have been given exclusive contracts to Syrian oil that is in the Golan Heights, which is part of Syria. It's currently under military occupation by Israel. And if you look at the Genie board of directors, they've got 8 advisors on this board. It consists of Lord Jacob Rothschild and several members of PNAC. Several members of the Project for a New American Century are right there on the board with Jacob Rothschild. And that includes Vice President Dick Cheney. It includes former CIA Director James Woolsey. What a coincidence. It is an indisputable fact that the very same men who are working on behalf of the Rothschild corporations are the same men who crafted the plan to take control of the Middle East. I'm not just trying to make connections that don't exist here. This is the truth. And it is no coincidence that that the same men, the same ones that crafted this plan to take control of the Middle East, are the ones pushing for those same for expanded wars in the Middle East today. Again, look at it. You've got the PNAC member John Bolton, who is the new National Security Advisor. Look him up on Fox News. There are tons of examples of him calling over the years. He wants the United States to go to war with North Korea. He wants to go to war with Iran. And he even calls for war with Russia. Direct warfare between the United States and Russia. That's the kind of madman that Donald Trump just put in as the National Security Advisor. And like I told you in advance that I predicted it. I said that Trump was going to sack his National Security Advisor and install Bolton. And that's what happened. And I told you the reason why. It was because there was going to be a march toward war with Iran, and that Israel was going to take the lead in some of this to provide some cover. Well, as time went on, let's get back to Syria. As time went on, ISIS grew in power. They took control of most of the oil fields in Iraq and in Syria, and they conquered key locations in Syria, and they held the Syrian people hostage. ISIS fighters were given military support by a bunch of these local militias, barbaric groups. These are mostly affiliates of Al-Qaeda. And one of the militias is called Jaish al-Islam. Remember that name, because we're going to come back to it. That's a major part of this story, Jaish al-Islam. Well, it seemed for a time that ISIS was going to succeed in overthrowing the government there in Syria. But then President Bashar al-Assad, he really held on. Let me tell you about Assad. This guy is a Western-educated, English-speaking medical doctor. He is not a religious extremist. He's an Alawite. He's rather secular. He is not a monster. In fact, prior to 2013, Senator John Kerry, who succeeded Hillary Clinton as Secretary of State, Kerry was good personal friends with Assad. And you can look up pictures. You can see that not only did the men and their wives get together for dinners, but John Kerry used to go motorcycle riding with Assad. So this picture that the media is trying to paint of Assad as an animal. Really? A Western-educated medical doctor having dinner with John Kerry and going out motorcycle riding. He's a monster. Yeah. Well, when it became clear that the devastating assault by these Western-backed terrorists was not going to be able to topple Assad's regime, Barack Obama publicly stated, kind of out of the blue, that if Assad were to attack his own civilians with chemical weapons, that would constitute a red line being crossed, and that would not be tolerated. A ridiculous thing to say. Assad was not trying to kill his people, he was trying to liberate them. Well, coincidence, not long after this statement, a chemical attack outside of the Syrian capital of Damascus took place. And the deep state immediately accused Assad of gassing his own people. And so Barack Obama started making preparations for war. This is back in 2014. Fortunately, the Republicans in the U.S. Congress threatened to impeach Obama if he carried out some kind of unconstitutional attack on Syria. I wish the Republicans had that kind of willpower to say the same thing to Donald Trump, who's done and doing the same thing. But aside from the threat of impeachment, Russian President Vladimir Putin came to Syria's aid because Russia has got massive financial investments in Syria and in Iran. And the only naval base outside of the Black Sea that Russia has is in Syria. It's off the coast of Syria. So Syria is crucial to Russia. So what Putin said is he told Obama that if the United States tried to attack Syria, that Russia would defend its ally. They would do it militarily and even use nuclear weapons as a deterrent if necessary. And Obama backed down. But they didn't stop. They just changed tactics. So pretending like the CIA had not been arming and coordinating ISIS all along, which I had been reporting on before the name ISIS was even known in the media. I was reporting on the movement of the guns back in 2013, 2014. I reported it a lot on the movement of these guns, the arming of these people, the merging of these forces. That's why you listen to my channel, because I'll give you the news before it becomes public. This is geopolitics. Well, which is really my forte. So they pretend like the CIA had not been doing this all along. And in, I think it was September of 2014, Barack Obama said that the United States was going to begin arming moderate rebels. Moderate rebels, or in other words, Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda and its affiliates. So to counter the advances of these terrorists following the arming of them by the CIA, President Bashar al-Assad asked for help from his allies, from Russia and from Iran. And they do have military pacts, so it's not surprising. Well, Iran responded by providing financing for the Lebanese Hezbollah paramilitary. And these people went in there to defend Syria. And then Russia began airstrikes to pound ISIS and the CIA-backed moderate rebels. Now remember that. Russia and Iran are there by invitation of the sovereign government of Syria. The United States is not. We are there as invaders. Well, it's no coincidence that the areas that ISIS had taken control of just happened to be the most oil-rich regions of the country. Nor was it a coincidence that the CIA was helping ISIS to sell this stolen oil on the black market to help finance their terrorism there in the region. They wanted to create instability. They wanted to destabilize Syria. They wanted to destabilize Iraq. They wanted to overthrow. They wanted a repeat of what they did in Libya. It just didn't turn out that way. But over the course of the next year, 2014, 2015, with Russian and Iranian assistance, Syria began to regain its territory. And one of the hardest battles was liberating the town, the city of Aleppo. Don't ask Vice Presidential candidate Gary Johnson about Aleppo. You got to be a political junkie to get that pun. But to help free the tens of thousands of Syrian hostages that were in Aleppo, Russia destroyed, they bombed this nearby bunker just outside the city. The bunker was full of CIA, Mossad, and Qatari operatives. They were in there providing intelligence and logistical support to ISIS, trying to help them hold on to Aleppo. That's the truth. That is the truth. Vladimir Putin himself has said that is the case, and that's been confirmed by a lot of other independent journalists. That's what was happening. Well, not long after that, the United States military began its own direct invasion of Syria. This keeps ramping up. It gets worse and worse. So we've got both Russian and U.S. Air Force jets flying over the same skies, bombing each other's proxies that are down on the ground. But the strategy of Russia and Syria and Iran eventually succeeded, and they drove ISIS out of much of the nation so that they only held on to a handful of places. And then there were some other regions that were still in the control of these Al-Qaeda affiliates. So when Donald Trump became president back in, became president the end of January 2017, what he did was he dramatically increased the presence of U.S. forces in Syria. Now, he did it in the name of fighting ISIS, but what most of the public doesn't realize is that the true purpose of these ground forces has been to prepare for a larger offensive to topple the Syrian government. It has been a slow, quiet buildup, and I've chronicled some of this. I have told you guys, I've discussed, I get intelligence from a lot of people, including wives of soldiers that are being deployed to places like Jordan, going in there right along the border. Do you know that right now thousands of U.S. troops are quietly sitting at the border right there below Syria? A lot of them. Well, in April of 2017, as Syrian forces fought to liberate one particular city called Khan Sheikhoun, there was an Al-Qaeda group called Al-Nusra Front that had this city in a headlock. Syrian forces trying to liberate them, including using airstrikes. Well, suddenly there's this chemical attack that gets carried out. 86 people died. Okay, this is just months after Trump took office. The truth is, Al-Qaeda carried out that attack. Al-Qaeda used a humanitarian aid group called the White Helmets to stage the event to make it look like the Syrian Air Force had dropped chemical weapon bombs on the civilians. Now, at the time, Russia and Syria both flat out denied it. They said there was no evidence that the Air Force was responsible for this incident. But before any investigation could be done to find out what really happened, President Donald Trump launched cruise missile strikes at a Syrian air base. An act of war. An act of war which he said he would never do. These missiles not only hit the air base, they also killed dozens of civilians, including 9 children. That was what Donald Trump did. Oh, suddenly there's these dead children from a chemical weapons attack in Khan Sheikhoun. Well, naturally, the best response is, let's not find out what happened. Let's just go kill some more children. All right. And by the way, in February of this year, 2018, Trump's Secretary of Defense, Mad Dog James Mattis, publicly admitted that the United States has zero evidence that the Syrian government was responsible for that chemical attack in Khan Sheikhoun. That's the Secretary of Defense saying America has no evidence. And yet we killed dozens of civilians based on, it's what the CIA told us happened, so let's just believe them. Well, now here we are in April of 2018, and another incident has just taken place. And this incident is being used as justification by both the United States and by Israel to dramatically expand warfare in Syria. So let's get into these details. Outside of Damascus is a region called Ghouta. It's kind of like, it's both suburban and a countryside. In 2012, the CIA coordinated a militia-led uprising in Ghouta. This is one of the early regions. This is just outside of the capital. Then in 2013, these rebel forces backed by the CIA, they took over Ghouta, trapping a civilian population of approximately 400,000 Syrians inside. And since 2013, these rebel forces in eastern Ghouta have been under siege by the Syrian army and by Iranian-backed Hezbollah fighters. I think there's actually some actual Iranian fighters there as well. They have been trying to liberate the captives in eastern Ghouta. So as of 2017, the main U.S.-backed rebel faction that is in control of Ghouta, the bad guys, the name of the group is Jaish al-Islam. Jaish al-Islam, this is the Al-Qaeda affiliate that I mentioned earlier. Jaish al-Islam has been based in eastern Ghouta in a town called Douma. They've got approximately 15,000 fighters right in this little region. Now, because Jaish al-Islam has embedded itself amidst this dense civilian population, there have naturally been staggering numbers of civilian casualties during this very long conflict. And I have watched videos of some of the civilians, actually several Syrian civilians, who have managed to escape from Douma. And they all report the same things. They all say that Jaish al-Islam militants massacre anybody, any of the civilians who they perceive to be supportive of the Syrian army, they'll kill them. And these Jaish al-Islam monsters, they routinely steal the humanitarian supplies and the food that the Syrian government is trying to get in to provide relief for the civilians. The refugees report that have escaped, they report that there's mass starvation inside of Douma. Not only that, but Jaish al-Islam, these guys are among the religious radicals. They're trying to force the population there, which is mostly secular, a rather secular to kind of moderately religious. They're trying to force them to comply with the strict Sharia law. Now remember, these extremists, Jaish al-Islam, these are the ones being backed by the United States. And the U.S. government knows that Jaish al-Islam fighters are terrorists. And they know it for sure. In fact, on June 28th of 2016, this is during the summer of the presidential race. At that point, they were still trying to determine who was going to win the nomination of the two parties. Well, at that point, Secretary of State John Kerry, he gave a speech, and you can look this up, June 28th, 2016. He gave a speech in Aspen, Colorado. And in that speech, he specifically named Jaish al-Islam as, quote, a subgroup of ISIL terrorists. And as further proof that Jaish al-Islam is a terrorist group, there was a video that was posted showing a terrifying tactic used by the group. You can't find it on YouTube because I don't think. It's probably one of those that gets removed. But a video was posted showing how Jaish tries to defend itself from the Syrian army around Douma. The video shows them taking around 700 civilians from Douma and putting 7 of them at a time into cages. And they put 100 of these cages around eastern Ghouta. So you've got 700 civilians in cages set up around eastern Ghouta being used as human shields to try to stop the Syrian Air Force from carrying out airstrikes. That's one. And two is if the civilians get killed, they can go out and tell the public, hey, look, the Syrian army is killing civilians. That's how these people operate. Now, fortunately, Assad and his allies were able to bring Jaish al-Islam to its knees. Took a while, but they had the help of the Russians. They had the help of Lebanese Hezbollah. They had the help of Iran. So Jaish al-Islam has been in talks with Russian representatives recently. They've come to some agreements to surrender. But now we get into the current event, the one that everyone is talking about. Almost to the day, 1 year after the chemical attack in Khan Sheikhoun, dozens of civilians, they get killed in Douma, allegedly with chlorine gas bombs, dropped by the Syrian Air Force. And just hours, mere hours after this incident, before any investigation had been done, the Israeli Air Force invaded Syria and conducted airstrikes, which killed 14 people, including citizens of Iran. Not only that, but President Donald Trump tweeted that Assad is an animal and that Assad and Russia are responsible for the deaths of those children. The media keeps playing this footage over and over, the sickening footage of these children, dead bodies. It's Vladimir Putin's fault. That's what Donald Trump is saying. With neocon Zionist John Bolton assuming power today, I think we can all be quite sure of what Trump is planning. You don't bring John Bolton in unless you're getting ready to go to war, because that's all Bolton is for. He is a monster, a bloody, godless monster. Now, let me do for you what the mainstream media won't do. I'm going to help you use some logic. I'm going to help you use some reasoning. I'm going to give you some facts so that you can make up your own doggone mind as to who is responsible for the incident in Douma. Let's think about this. Even though Jaish al-Islam was defeated, even though they were in the process of negotiating their surrender, we are supposed to believe that the Syrian Air Force decided to carry out a completely unnecessary and strategically stupid chemical weapon attack on the very civilians that they've been fighting for years to liberate. We are supposed to believe that Jaish al-Islam, the same group that starves the people and puts hundreds of them in cages out in the line of fire, they're the innocent ones. They're the good guys. That's what we're being told by the U.S. government. Well, I'm here to tell you that the attack that took place in Douma, the attack that is being used as a pretext for dramatically expanding war, that attack was carried out by Jaish al-Islam. Yes, this is, for those that are going to ask, this is most definitely a classic false flag attack. Here's what I can tell you. The suspected chemical attack in Douma took place on April 7th, 2018. But here's the twist. Here's something that I learned from a Syrian journalist named Kovan Dirij, that the Douma chemical attack marked the one-year anniversary of a chemical attack by Jaish al-Islam in Aleppo on April 7th of 2017. This same group, Jaish al-Islam, carried out a chemical weapon attack. The attack took place in the Sheikh Maksud district up in Aleppo. Victims were rushed to a local hospital. They were suffering from spasms and convulsions, and the Kurdish Red Crescent conducted chemical analysis, and they confirmed that it was chlorine gas that was used. And another source of mine, another local journalist named Narus Utman, he confirmed that the attack killed at least 23 people, that it injured over 100 more. And I looked this up. The Jaish al-Islam brigade commander who ordered the chemical weapon attack, he was captured, and he publicly admitted to the crime. So even Jaish al-Islam admitted that they used chlorine gas in an attack that killed dozens of civilians. So again, I ask you to think about this logically. If Jaish al-Islam has a history of using chlorine gas and using civilian lives to accomplish their strategic goals, does it not make far more sense that the party that carried out the attack on the Duma civilians this week was in fact Jaish al-Islam and not the Syrian government? The Syrian government that has been sacrificing the blood of their own soldiers to free the captive civilians? Geez, the people that believe this propaganda. And the result of the attack, think about it. Who does it benefit? Does it benefit the Syrian government in any way? No, not one bit. Jaish al-Islam was on the brink of surrender, and they have now received a complete infusion of powerful support from Israel and the United States. They've got no reason to surrender at this point, because they can see that the militaries of the United States and Israel are coming to their rescue. Well, just a few days ago, the first batch of civilian hostages held in Duma was released by Jaish al-Islam. And there were scores of, it was mostly women and children, scores of them were put on a bus. They were transported through the Al-Wafidin humanitarian corridor on, this was on Sunday night. And the bus arrived in the capital of Damascus, where literally thousands of Syrian citizens were waiting for them, cheering for the hostages as they got off the bus. Now, how does it make any sense whatsoever that the Syrian government would target any of these individuals with chlorine gas? It's sheer stupidity. Israel, the prime minister there, Benjamin Netanyahu, he knows that President Assad did not gas his own people. How convenient, by the way, that this attack that Israel carried out is the big news item and not the attack that Israel perpetrated against the people in Gaza. And President Donald Trump knows it too. He knows this was not the work of Bashar al-Assad. Folks, for the last several years, I have been providing my viewers with detailed reports on this march to war. But it isn't Syria that this is really all about. It's about Iran. It has always been about Iran. All of the major events that have transpired lead us up to this point. I have predicted all of these things in my writings and in my videos. And if you remember me making some of these assertions in advance, tell me what you remember in the comments section, because I want other viewers to have confidence that I do know what I'm talking about. I'm telling you now, President Trump is working as fast as he can to get us into a war with Iran. And if you don't think that that's going to pull in Russia, you're crazy. Those of you viewers who deny what Trump is doing, who deny that he's trying to get us into a war with Iran, that's completely unjust. You're the same uninformed people who told me I was crazy back in when I said that Trump was going to attack Syria in his first year in office. Turns out I was right about that, wasn't I? And I'm right about this. This is something that I love. It's my passion. I've been doing it for over 20 years. Middle Eastern geopolitics. I have got a whole lot more than I want to tell you about, but I'm checking the time here and I see that I'm going quite long in this video. So other things that I have to tell you about are going to have to wait for the next video. I'll probably break it up, do smaller videos rather than a long one like this. But Again, I want to call on my viewers to share this video, though. I don't want you to think that I have any ulterior motive. What I want for this video is not just to get a couple thousand views. I want tens of thousands of views. But that's not going to happen without your help. I used to get tens of thousands of views easily on my videos. It's been a while now since that happened, since they deleted my channel and I got it back up again. YouTube is heavily suppressing my work. We know how much YouTube cares about getting the truth out to the people, right? So I need you to share this video. And not just once. I want you to share it a lot. I want you to share it in multiple places. I want you to flood the internet with this video. Because I want to get the public tuned into my channel for this subject. I want them to know to come to my channel for this subject. Because I've got so much more information that I've researched and that I've been given by sources who know a whole lot more than what the mainstream media here in the United States is able or willing to share with the people. I want Blackstone Intelligence to be a resource for the public, for information on this march toward World War III. Because mark my words, that is where we are headed. For Blackstone Intelligence, I'm Jake Morphonios.